self are you? On a scale of 1 to 10, how compassionate to yourself are you? And then also, please let us know where you're coming in from. I would say personally that I'm close to 10, and that's after decades of work. I would say when I started going to school for psychology at 17 and started introspecting, I was closer to 5. Definitely criticized myself, didn't like how I looked, didn't like the mirror, didn't like what I said, didn't like how smart I was, didn't like how antisocial I was, didn't like a lot of things about myself. And then I would just project that onto others, right? We would just find faults in others. I used to think, well, no, I don't have low self-esteem. I have low esteem of others. But really, the reason why you have low esteem of others is because you have low esteem of self. Done so much work on this, close to 10. Good. We've got 5, we've got a 1, we've got a 6. The question, everybody, is on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at with self-compassion? 7, 3 from New York. Scale and place would be amazing to write down. So today we're going to be talking about the different types of self-compassion. We're going to be looking at this dude, a little bit at what I did. That's from the recording of my self-expansion.app members, but I've got a little bit to say on this live. I would think a 10 would be unity consciousness. No, because we're talking about self-compassion here. So looking internally, yes, you eventually do start to look at reality as you look at yourself. And I also would say that at 10, you should already be able to be empathic and be able to sense consciousness outside of our physical self. So yes, it is a step in the direction of unity consciousness. However, it's not necessarily the same thing the way that I'm asking the question, right? I'm asking like towards self. So we got a 1 in here. We got a 3 in here. Oh, in that case, I'm a 10. I thought you were talking about pushing myself. No, so think about compassion. Actually, let's look up define compassion. Definition of compassion: sympathetic. I'll just read it word for word. Sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. Interesting definition there, Google. Let's look up etymology because that's the more accurate origins of what it actually means. Meaning to suffer with. So come is coming from with, and then pati means suffer, and that's where compassion comes from. Sympathia. I'm not pronouncing that right. Sympathe. There we go. Which also conveys the idea of shared suffering. Essentially, compassion involves feeling empathy for another's suffering and being moved to alleviate it. All right, hold up. So let's define suffering. I mean, suffering equals pain times the amount of resistance, right? So suffering equals the state of undergoing pain, distress, or hardship. Actually, when we think about compassion, we're not always thinking about it being tied to suffering, but with what we're going to be going over today, I actually do have suffering in there. And common humanity, this actually means that you're recognizing that part of being a human is going through, quote, pain and suffering. And so it's looking like compassion is the acknowledgement of that. I attempt to love myself out loud 24 hours a day. On a scale of 1 to 10, I am at 1 million. I'm crying right now saying those words to you. I have to forgive myself. Congrats. 10, maybe 9 on a slow day. Is self-confidence the same as self-compassion? So I think I just went over compassion. I'm sure this was asked before. So self-love is not the same as self-compassion. Self-confidence is not the same as self-compassion, because compassion means the ability, let me get to the exact. Compassion is sympathetic pity or concern for the sufferings and misfortunes of others. So that means that you have sympathetic concern, acknowledgments for the sufferings of you going on through life. Interesting, right? Interesting that there's all these different aspects, right? So what that means is when we are challenged or in a situation that maybe we caused, if we have high self-compassion, we have an ability to offer comfort and soothing energy to ourself. Comfort and soothing energy towards ourself. That's, and I'll break this down, but that's the yin. Comfort, soothing, validating. When there's pain, when there's suffering. And then there's the other part of this, which is often overlooked because we really think about having compassion to ourselves as comforting, soothing, and validating. It's like how we would talk to a best friend to soothe them, let them know that it's okay. Yeah, when I have to work, I have no sympathy for myself. Shed loads for others, though. Too much. You suffer well, or that person suffers well. You can only provide compassion when you feel it for self. This is why self-work, and as I call it, self-expansion, is so important. Because when we can have compassion for self, then we can expand that compassion to other selves, which is a part of, as someone was saying earlier, the grand unified consciousness. There are no others, as some sages have said. My empathy is over the top, too much. Sorry, yeah, when I have to work for that evil stuff called money, the monolithic, the mono I, the one I is money. Mono, ni, I. That's an oxymoron, though. Compassion is always for others, according to you. I don't know if that's a statement, an argument, or what. 10, I think you're talking about empathy. I'm not talking about empathy. I just defined compassion. Suffering is the negative delta between your expectations of where you think you should be and where you are. I have compassion for other people, but not so much for myself. To be clear, my intention is to be compassionate for self or having faith in me both. So guys, compassion by definition, according to Oxford Dictionary, is sympathetic pity or concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. So if we put the word self in front of that, then it is sympathetic pity or concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of self. And then just to give you guys the etymology of compassion, it originates from Latin compati, meaning to suffer with. So compati, compassion, means to suffer with. So how does that have to do with self? So there's this this paper. You guys can look it up. Let me see if I can get Neff. Kristin Neff, 2016. I think she wrote a book in that same year, but also there's a paper that's pretty easy to find. Do I have it on my computer right now? No, because I exited out my windows. But essentially, Kristin breaks down self-compassion. Let me see if I can get this all in the screen. I might have to come off with my body. Let me see if I can do this too. All right. How can I get this in the middle? Self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness of suffering. Self-kindness, common humanity, mindfulness of suffering. So self-kindness, we know what those words mean. Common humanity would mean that in order to be compassionate, this is an aspect of compassion. And that means that recognition of suffering being a part of the human experience. That's what common humanity means. Mindfulness of suffering, what this means is that you are able to witness and observe the fact that self is currently suffering. I don't have the marker to fix that. Mindfulness of suffering. So these three are broken down into two more steps, yin and yang or yang. And so most people, when they think of being compassionate, they're thinking of these things: comforting, soothing, and validating. And this is with being with ourselves. All right. Comforting, soothing, and validating. Now, yang aspect of compassion would be how you act in the world. And this would be protecting, providing, and motivating. And we're going to go over what I mean by that. But protecting, providing, and motivating would be like standing up for yourself. So the example of a yin, comforting, soothing, validating, would be if you are overworked, you're completely overworked. So you take an initiative to comfort, soothe, and validate yourself. Meaning, comfort and soothe would be go on a walk, book a massage, hang out, make time to hang out with your friends because that soothes you, it comforts you. Validating, like acknowledge that you're doing your best. Yang, protecting, providing, motivating. that would be like, let's say you're overwhelmed at work. That would be talking to your boss or your supervisor about how you are feeling, probably using some sort of nonviolent communication to do so, which is something else that we work on, but using some sort of nonviolent communication to do so, maybe asking for behavior change. And you're doing this to protect, provide, and or this isn't a motivation, but you're on the yang side of self-compassion. So you are suffering. There's the soothing part of it, and then there's the yang part of it, which is the shielding part of it. And so the actual practice that we did, which we combine this all with breath work and journaling and movement and meditation, is this was called the practice for two hands of self-compassion. So on one hand, you have soothing, on the other, which is important, that's yin. On the other hand, you have like shielding. There's stopping the suffering, right? So some of us are heavy on the yang. We are stopping the suffering for self, which if that's all we're doing is chasing for change, that will lead to burnout, right? If we're never soothing and we're always trying to shield ourselves, that's going to be unbalanced. And if we're only soothing, but we're never shielding, then we're going to just be wallowing in our sorrows. We're going to just be sort of like constantly in this healing state. Right? You guys know people like that, right? That are just always, oh, I'm healing. It's like almost like you just retreat inward. You spend a lot of time alone. You set up a little meditation place at your house. You go to sound healings. You meet up with other people who are, docile and soft and open-hearted. And you get in this very, very yin state. And the purpose of being able to coordinate that is for us to strive towards solutions in a way that where you don't always have to be healing and fixing or healing. And just like physical coordination, like athletes can coordinate balance, accuracy, agility, strength, speed, flexibility. They have all of these aspects of their physical nature, endurance, power. They have all of these aspects that they can coordinate. They can turn off. They can like dial in exactly how much of each of those they need. We're like that internally as well. We have all of these different aspects of self. Right now, we're zooming into compassion. And just like there's a spectrum of how much strength you can be using in an athletic field, or how much force you could be putting, or how pliable and versatile you're going to be between those aspects, it's the same thing with all of our emotional aspects as well. So compassion is made up of both a soothing nature and a like protecting nature to stop the suffering from continuing to happen. Without knowing that, you're just likely going to be doing whatever your parents did to you. And it's likely unbalanced. Likely just meaning like generally, all right? So I've got some questions that we can ask, all right? So number one is like, just based on that, where would you guys say that you lean towards? The yin or the yang? Scott's saying many are stuck in the healing loop, like a circle versus a curve towards thriving. Yeah, it's like a circle. You're just in this loop of wallowing around our traumas. We're just fixated around the traumas, almost to the fact where healing feels good, guys. You need that trauma as the reason why you're healing. So resolving that trauma makes it so that you are now addicted to the trauma. You are so innocent and true. I love you so much. Ra, you are so kind in your choice of language. It is delicately effective and comforting. Compassion, accepting, not always comforting. I've got some questions for us to figure this out a little bit. That causes confusion in language and intention. I'm out of here, man. You ghosting and shit. I'm literally reading everybody's comments. You are changing the meaning. You can't do that. Again, I looked up the definition and the etymology, Susie. I don't know what else you want. If we understand words to mean something, that's also relevant. However, I'm basing this around the structure of the definition, etymology, and what the actual intention of the word is. Compassion is what you have for others, though. All right, I'm going to say that Susie here has she said she left. I don't want to, but if Susie's still here, what would you call self-compassion? I think you said empathy, which that doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense to me, but just I don't think she's here anymore. But let me just look up empathy definition. The ability to understand and share the feelings of another, right? So it's still, by definition, having to do with others. And as I said, the word self here on compassion generally means having to do with other people. But when you put the word self here, now that's an adjective. It's acting as an adjective to form the meaning of the word. Love this and want to join an event as soon as I can. Keep spreading the love and the maneuvers. Okay, guys. So do you get the concepts on the dry erase board from Kristin Neff's book from 2016? This is from, just look at the paper, the book you have to buy. But if you just look up Kristin Neff, self-compassion. And again, I'm not making up self-compassion either. This is like this is a term that has been studied psychologically by Kristin Neff. She wrote an entire book on it. So that's what I'm basing this on. Yes, it's in the paper is what I'm basing this yin yang thing. So let's ask ourselves, so guys, are we more on the soothing self-compassion, or are we more on the protecting self-compassion? And I guess let's go into some other questions. So think of a challenge that you're facing right now. A challenge that you're facing right now. So this is a way that you can bring self-compassion into your life with these different aspects. So from a yin standpoint, when you think about this challenge that may be causing suffering, and I know some of you guys are allergic to suffering and words like that because of the work that we do, but let's just take it for an exercise, or use the word challenge, like what in your life is a challenge right now. And it's great if you've boxed in your life where you've got no challenge. I would knock on the door of the box that you've created and tell you to start growing, as opposed to just start sitting still. So if you're progressing, you're going to be meeting resistance, and you're going to be meeting challenges, and you're likely going to have parts of you suffering to a degree as you grow beyond the limits of your comforts. And so as we're growing, we're going to be meeting challenges. We're going to be meeting suffering. So think about one of those. And regarding that, from a yin standpoint, regarding that very specific scenario, the question is, what's something that you can do today that would feel like you're being hugged from the inside? Like you gifted yourself a hug. And that's a way that you can give yourself some yin self-compassion. Yeah, Melissa Photo is saying, if we believe that we are all one spiritually and consciously, then you don't need to add the word self to the word compassion. You know what I'm saying? Right. Yes. And that's the difficult part about language, is that we're all living in different constructed realities, and the language doesn't necessarily translate to all of these realities, especially me. I've chosen to speak at a certain level. It's not necessarily the level that I perceive life from. And so when people go to a class and they hear a teacher and they start complaining to me about the teacher, I always say, never mistake the teachings for the teacher. The teacher is teaching something at a perspective that most likely is not the perspective that the teacher has. In fact, I would say that if a teacher is teaching at their perspective, that they're teaching maybe too soon. Like teachers understand many, many perspectives, many levels, and they do better if they're teaching well below the level of their understanding, because they've been able to see it from multiple angles, and they can teach at that level. So a teacher, the words that they're using in a class, in an auditorium, online, is likely not how they perceive it. And that's important to know when you are judging and assessing teachers. And as a teacher, I'm letting you guys all know that a teacher's words are likely not what they believe, because things flip-flop all the time. There's paradoxes as you transcend these levels. And so what you teach a beginner is likely the opposite of what you would teach an expert. And anyone who's been a professional at anything knows that. The things that you learn on day one are the almost opposite of the things that you end up utilizing down the road. Compassion is at the opposite pole of all right, I'm going to actually admit I've never ever heard this word. I can't even pronounce it. Exigency? So let me look this up. Exigency. An urgent need or demand. Women worked long hours when the exigencies of the family economy demanded it. Live with passion. You know, Dekan, brah. Right. It's Hawaii talk. I talk to myself out loud 24 hours a day. Nowadays, I'm a black belt level at what I've coined discomfort training to create safety. This is the answer to your questioning on hugging from the inside. So talking to yourself. All right. So Yang question on dealing with some suffering, the protection part of things. If you guys are good at comforting yourself, if you're suffering with something, the balance to this would be asking yourself the question, what boundary could I be setting to prevent further stress and harm? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a boundary as well. What can I do to prevent stress and harm? As I was saying, some of our brains go right to that. There's none of this victim soothing stuff. They're just like, how do I stop this? Right? And some of us go right to, oh my gosh, I need a nap. I need to slow down my breathing. And so being able to ask yourself both of those, what can soothe me now and how can I stop this from happening? It sounds very simple, guys. When I say it, I know it sounds very simple. By the lack of people answering questions, I give myself compassion. I need to step away from the situation and sit under a tree. Sitting under a tree is a good example of that until my emotional waves move through. And that's an amazing thing to teach people to let. I like how Ashley said, sit under a tree until my emotional waves move through. And so what I'm getting that the reference to is the emotional waves, meaning the waves of energy that come through our body, move through the different aspects of ourselves, where first we are like, am I safe? And we can answer that question. Yes, I'm safe. And it's like, what do I do about this? How do I feel about this? And am I going to say anything about this? And what does this mean? And then it like allows it to move through your body so you can process it from all of these different emotional layers that are important to us. And it doesn't get stuck somewhere. It doesn't get stuck in the safe thing. And then we're just constantly seeking safety and survival because we've got all of this baggage stuck in our lower centers because we never processed it through. We just stuffed it down and pretty much determined we are not safe, but we will protect ourselves. And you're in this survival mechanism. So if we're not asking ourselves these questions and letting the emotions run through us, then that's when we create traumas. It's when we create blockages. And that's when we become not as functional. But when you have too much stress and to prevent it, you feel like just giving up and not doing anything. Then that's not the answer, right? So the reason why we get into the situation where there's too much stress and it's too difficult to prevent it is because we didn't ask these questions from the start. We were never taught to do this. And so this is what we're doing here, is I'm teaching you guys that find out what you need for yourself. I said being with ourselves, like find out what would make us feel comforted and soothed regarding the suffering with ourself. And then the yang part of it is acting out in the world. What sort of parameters do you work towards setting so that you're no longer stressed? You know what just came into my head right now is when I was a little boy, this would have had to been middle school. The bus would drop me off and I would have to walk essentially like 3 blocks to my house. And for those people that have been bullied, it essentially turns into a war zone. You get dropped off, and then it's like looking around, is anybody going to pick on me today? Are these kids going to pick on me? And so I just learned to walk really fast. And it was like, get off the bus first, walk really fast, so you didn't have to like interact with anybody else. And that was definitely a version of suffering. And that actually, I've never thought about it until now. And so when something like this comes up, I was just talking about blocking and moving energy, and we're talking about suffering. And this is like, this scenario has definitely been living inside of me. And so I've definitely taken care of the yang part of it, right? I learned how to fight. My dad had a boxing bag, heavy bag, and a speed bag, and I use those all the time. I eventually just started fighting like every weekend in hockey, and I became like the bruiser, and I started working out to protect myself because of this scenario, guys. Like I'm literally revealing like what led me to become stronger. And it's because there was a part of me that when I was in middle school, I couldn't protect myself. So then when I became older, I learned how to protect myself and be more dominant to not just people in my school, but like everywhere. Like every weekend, I was faced with 2 new hockey teams that I could fight. And in hockey, you fight. Like you take off your gloves, your helmet, and it was just like a real fight for free. No jail time, no nothing. But I have not soothed and calmed this part of me, right? Like I haven't breathed this and relaxed these emotional traumas and this memory out of my system. How do I know I haven't? Well, because I just said I can't remember ever thinking about this ever until right now. Like this exact getting dropped off at the bus, I can hear the bus and then the walk from the bus stop to my house. And so I could ask the question was one thing today that I could, hug myself. And for me, that feels like really just taking inhales and exhales and sending that hugging energy back to my younger self in a way. And I usually follow that into my body, and I'll find something that feels like it's knotted up energetically. And you can ask yourself, because I know exactly where I feel it. I feel it here. And you can put your hands on that area. However, the pressure, it doesn't have to be hard, and you can breathe into that. And I usually operate within the construct that time isn't linear. So that version of myself and the bus stop and the walk homes that I used to do is actually happening now in another reality. And so connecting, which is also we call that remembering, right? You become a member of that reality again, member. You initiate membership with that reality and send compassionate energy, soothing energy, send compassion, soothing. You recognize that this is common humanity, right? A lot of us have our own types of suffering in childhood. For me, this isn't that bad, right? Comparatively to some other people. So mindfulness of the suffering, also motivating, motivating, like that helped me out, actually. That gave me an amazing life because I was enabled and activated to defend myself. And I actually am really good at fighting, I found out, and really good at all things fitness. And maybe that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have been picked on. What would you say to a child with this predicament, your bus story? Right. That's a good question. So it's the same thing. Soothing energy, acknowledgement energy, and then also protection energy is like, is there another bus stop that you can get off at? Can you ask your parents to pick you up? And you as a parent, is there anything that you can do for that? I actually don't have children yet, so I'm not the best one to answer that question. And I will be happy to state my limits on this. I'll be better able to answer that question in a year, because yes. Thank you for this vulnerable share. You are generous. To answer your question directly, it's impossible to soothe oneself. You just said what I meant. You must sit with it, keeping it company, which is a comfort to the feeling. A boundary will only get us stuck. But what would you say as an adult to the childhood bus experience you had? Is this the same person asking this question? Yes. All right. So it depends, first, as an adult who has a perspective and can protect, the adult me if I'm talking to a child, the first order of business would be figuring out if we can stop this, right? Can we stop this? Can we protect the child? Maybe the child has some information on that could help. And then acknowledging that this is a not so pretty part of life, and we all go through this as humans on this, in this game, and we learn. This is a learning experience. And ask the child what sort of feelings they feel about this. What do they think about this? And so we get the information from the child of where they're at, because as an adult, a lot of the times we put meaning on what the kids are going through that aren't accurate. And so, yes, obviously it seems like this is obviously bad. Maybe, you never know. You never know. The kid might feel like their own superhero, and this is like the game that they get to play every single day. That definitely wasn't my case. But again, a lot of things that are seemingly negative to adults aren't to the kid. But with that said, get their actual perspective of how they think about this, how they feel about this, what would make them feel safe, what do they need in this situation. Those questions have to be asked to somebody else. I'm not even just talking about kids. I'm talking about like anybody. If you're a manager and an employee comes in and to complain about you, your first instinct is going to be like, okay, how do I fix this? But don't step over figuring out, like asking more questions. How does this make you feel? What are your thoughts on this? What would resolve this for you? What would make you feel more comfortable? In your dream situation, what would your wish be? And a lot of that can be handled. And then you can go from there. That would be my answer if I was dealing with this in current reality. Thank you for sharing your personal memories. That's brave. Hugs to you. What would you recommend some family education? What would you recommend some without family education and home-only mobile? Well, I can't really make sense of that question. Mild Charcy. Ask that again. Congrats. Baby on the way. Yes. I recommend something for somebody without recommend something for someone without family and education. I'm kind of recommending a lot of stuff right now. So when you guys are feeling overwhelmed, which I hear a lot, right? Like one of these, like soothing on the yin, soothing, this actually refers to physical, like physically soothing. So when you guys are feeling overwhelmed, a lot of that's happening up here. And we try and fix it up here, which then causes more overwhelm. And so to stop that cycle, you come from the side and you address it indirectly by soothing the physical body. Because when you're going nuts up here, you don't realize it, but you're also doing this. You're tightening up in places where you would be protecting yourself. So even though you're not protecting yourself in reality, your body's starting to clench. Your jaw's tightening, your neck, your back of your neck, it's like your hairs are standing up back there. And that perpetually going on for a lifetime is how most of us are living right now. Our breath moves to our mouth instead of our nose, and we're breathing faster. We're getting ready to fight, flight. We're like getting ready for that. And then we're just in that forever. And that causes a lot of disease. And so when people that are suffering with health issues, a lot of the times stopping and soothing the physical body will release the tension and allow energy flow to the organs, the glands, the things that are breaking. And that's going to allow health to happen. When you guys are feeling scattered, like when you just feel like there's too much of you going out in all directions, this is where like organizing the external environment and basically saying no, like setting, like just pick one like boundary, like limit. Like if somebody's expecting you to always be there when they call, it's like maybe you have a conversation with this person that they're calling 4 times a day that you aren't going to be able to do that anymore because you need your energy for other things. And that will make you feel less scatterbrained. You're going to have more energy to focus into everything, which will make you feel less scattered. And then another thing that you can do, guys, which I'll get to in a second, I'm just going to, I'll finish this thread right now. But I'd like you guys to answer this question in the chat too. And this helps when you feel disconnected, when you feel like, when you just don't feel like you're a part of the thing that you're a part of. Name one thing that you're proud of. Name one thing that you're proud of and one thing that you're committed to improving. And so it's like, what's a success I've had and what are the successes that I'm yet to have? And when you focus on that, you're now reconnected and re-engaged with life or with a certain scenario. And so, especially if you still have that like thing that you're challenged with, what's one thing that you're proud of? A human in the field of consciousness whom intends daily to access compassion can endow their child with these skills and strength of imagination, osmosis and such. Diffusion and osmosis. Why can't I say this word? Osmosis. Osmosis. When you guys are mumbling, just open your mouth wider and express more with your lips, and it'll help you pronounce better. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickles. A human in the field of consciousness whom intends daily to access compassion can endow their child with these skills and strengths of imagination. Imagination is a good skill to have. I dance like a lunatic when I need to hug myself with the goal of physical comfort. When I dance, there is limitless release of expectations. I comfort myself with trust. My persistent curiosity, I am proud of this. I am proud of my awareness for my physical growth, says the David Garcia official. Awareness of my physical growth. Actually, awareness of all growth is going to increase acknowledgement of progression, which adds to happiness. It also adds to positive hormones, like for men, testosterone. When you acknowledge that you are winning, that increases your testosterone. When you fixate on the fact that you are losing, that decreases your testosterone. This has been proven in many animal studies that the alphas, the ones that are in charge, have higher levels of testosterone. And so then the question becomes, why is that? Well, it's not just in animals. When you look at athletes, the champions, when somebody wins something that is a hard battle, when it's perceptively a challenge to do and they win. So you have two people challenging, dueling. One person wins, one person loses. They did relatively the same amount of work, right? And if the odds are, like if the other person wins and the other person loses, the hormonal result would change, independent of the amount of activity done, is what I'm trying to say. It has to do with the fact that you win, that you get a bump in testosterone. The reason for that is because when you're the one on top, your body knows that. And what's your body going to be doing? It's going to be preparing for more challenges from the others who are seeking to gain that top position. And so from an evolutionary standpoint, when we look at animals, the inference to be made out of this is that when you win, your body prepares for you to be challenged so that you can win more. And so this happens when you're perceptively challenged to win. And so recognizing the route that you've come and the journey of what you've overcome, the more that you've overcome and how you have won in that scenario, essentially like doing hard stuff gives you more hormones to make you younger. I am proud of my attachment to the word expansion. I'm proud of my sparks, which I turn into controlled fires of ascension in different avenues of life. Yes, some of us are very fiery. Let's go. Let us go. Let's go. All right, let's actually go live the rest of our life, guys. Thank you for spending this hour with me. And remember that, like the two hands of self-compassion. We've got the soothing, the comforting, nourishing, and then we've got like the protecting, the motivating hand. And we need both to be balanced. And if you guys want to do a really cool exercise on that, go to selfexpansion.app. 7 days free. And I've got a whole 55-minute long, it's like 15 minutes of journaling on what we did today. And then we go into a movement and breathwork set to really encode that into the body. And it ends with a meditation where we actually can coordinate both energies of yin and yang of this self-compassion, and we can blend those together, just like an athlete blends different aspects of all of their skills together. Ra, you changed my brain chemistry live for 1 hour per week. I am fortunate enough to be addicted to the hormonal change. You care about humanity. Thank you so much. Fun. Bye-bye, everybody.